All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Wednesday, everybody. We are one day away from the start of the NBA Finals, and after much deliberation, after much film, after mailbags, after everything, we are finally going to do our prediction show today. So I'm going to go over the 5 things that I expect to see in this series, just 5 kind of general predictions of things that I think we'll see. And then lastly, at the end of the show, I will give you guys my pick for the 2024 NBA Finals. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at _JasonLT so you guys don't miss show announcements. Don't forget about our podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts, under Hoops Tonight. And then last but not least, keep dropping mailbag questions in those YouTube comments so we keep hitting them throughout the series and over the course of the offseason. All right, let's talk some basketball. So 5 things I expect to see in the 2024 NBA Finals between Boston and Dallas. Number 1, I expect Luka to look very comfortable. We just saw against Minnesota's defensive personnel with Jaden McDaniels, who, again, I don't think he's as big and strong. Obviously, he's not as big and strong as Tatum, who will present a different type of physical challenge to Luka. But we saw Kyle Anderson, who's a similar type of physical build. We saw Jaden McDaniels. We saw a lot of really good defensive personnel on Luka and a substantially better rim protector in Rudy Gobert than anybody that Boston brings to the table. And Luka looked really comfortable. 32 points per game. He was 47% from the field, 43% from 3 on 11 attempts per game in that series against Minnesota. So I think Luka is going to look more or less similar in terms of his command of the series in this particular matchup. His knee looked better. He looked more or less 100% to me. He's also had a full week of rest since then to kind of keep things sharp and healthy. So like I expect Luka to look comfortable. And then also Boston's pick and roll defense is the weak point of their defense. They obviously, Porzingis being out had an impact on the metrics, but even with Porzingis in the lineup, that's the one weak point in Boston's defense. They have defenders that do okay in switches. I think Al Horford does better on switches than a guy like Porzingis, but Porzingis is much better at the rim. But neither of them presents that unique capability that a Rudy Gobert or some other guys around the league that can defend in a deep drop, defend at the level, and defend in switches. And so I expect a lot of attacking there. Now, Boston's going to have counters like we talked about in the film sessions. I expect to see Kristaps Porzingis on PJ Washington for the majority of the series. But in general, I think that Luka is going to look to attack that specific opening throughout the series, and I do think he will look comfortable. Number 2, PJ Washington's three-point shooting will be the main swing factor for the Dallas Mavericks. Again, as we talked about, with Porzingis on PJ Washington, the simple problem that presents for Dallas is if he rolls into the lane on ball screens against Porzingis, he's just not the vertical spacer that Daniel Gafford or Derek Lively is. If he pops to the three-point line, he's a 29.5% above the break three-point shooter in this postseason run, over 41% from the corners. But by virtue of just the way pick and roll works, when you pop to the three-point line, generally speaking, it's an above-the-break 3. And it would just be really difficult to configure that to end in a corner 3 for PJ Washington anyway. And so PJ Washington's ability to knock down above-the-break 3s or to drive those closeouts and hit floaters and make plays off the bounce, that is going to be a huge swing factor for Dallas's offense in the series because he is going to be the entry point for them to attack Boston's defense through Porzingis or Horford, whoever's on the floor. Number 3, Porzingis' three-point shooting will be the main swing factor for Boston. One of the main elements to Dallas's defense, they are a load-up defense. They want to keep their rim protectors at the rim. They want to shrink the floor on ball handlers and leave openings at the three-point line, usually on the opposite end of the floor. Specifically in pick and roll, Gafford and Lively have been guarding a roll man in Rudy Gobert that has bad hands, that struggles to finish layups. He shot below 50% on layups in this postseason run, right? So like totally different type of offensive threat in Kristaps Porzingis, even than Chet Holmgren, who shot just 22% from 3 in the Dallas Mavericks series, right? So like Porzingis, who's shooting 40% from 3 in the 4 playoff games he's played this year, and I think 38% for the season, just a completely different threat, and specifically is comfortable and confident shooting out well beyond the above the break line, like out to like 26, 27 feet. He's pretty comfortable. And so Lively and Gafford, if they're going to protect the rim in ball screens and in just straight ISO post-up situations where they're just helping off of Porzingis, they're going to have to concede those threes. I believe they will concede them to start the series, right? If Porzingis starts hitting, that will force Dallas to abandon a lot of their core defensive concepts and change the way that they look to guard a lot of this stuff. So Porzingis' three-point shooting is going to be huge. If his efficiency dips to the point where it's tenable for Dallas to leave him open, or if Porzingis loses confidence, that could be a massive swing in Dallas's favor over the course of the series. We've seen good shooters on great teams lose confidence in the finals before. Even for the champion last year, Michael Porter Jr. struggled for Denver. Michael Porter Jr. struggled again this year in the Minnesota series, right? Like Harrison Barnes in the 2016 finals. We've seen guys that can shoot go ice cold in the NBA finals and just the pressure of that stage in that situation. And if that happens to Porzingis, that would be a huge swing in Dallas's favor, especially if it continued along to Horford. Number 4, Jayson Tatum's impact will extend well beyond the box score. I'm not interested in having a conversation about how well Tatum is playing in this series that focuses solely on the box score. It's a factor. He will need to produce offensively, but if he's at 25 points per game in the series on, let's call it 60% true shooting, but it seems like he's not as involved offensively, that probably has a lot to do with the way he's being guarded and all of the defensive responsibility that he has in this group. Obviously, if he goes into the series and he averages 22 points per game and shoots like 37% from the field, that's a different story. But make sure that we pay attention over the course of the series of all the little things that Tatum does to make this team function. On the offensive end of the floor, with him being the entry point to, because he's one of their best playmakers, probably the best playmaker on the team, with him running guard action with Derek White and Drew Holiday to attack Luka Doncic, get the defense in rotation with simple playmaking, and then everything he can do on the defensive end of the floor between being the low man, switching onto anybody, switching onto Luka. Tatum is a Swiss Army knife, and he needs to be covered in that specific way. It's a very different type of series. I used to run into this all the time with comparing LeBron to some of these other guys at the top of the league. Like, what Luka does for Dallas is very different than what Jayson Tatum does for Boston, and so just zeroing in on box score numbers I don't think is a fair way to characterize their roles in this series. And then lastly, I think we will see multiple Boston blowouts in this series. I'm not going to get into the specifics why, because I want to save it for my prediction, or my actual pick for the series. But one of my big predictions for the series, I think we will see multiple games where Boston wins and the game is over in the early fourth quarter. I think that's just going to be a recurring theme. I think we're going to see at least 2 of them over the course of the series. We're this close to crowning a new NBA champ, and with the action heating up on the court, it's even hotter at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. There's only so many games left, and DraftKings Sportsbook has you covered with same-game parlays, live betting, odds boosts, and so much more. Don't miss out, or you'll have to wait until next NBA season to place your bets. It's super easy for first-timers to get started. Try betting on something simple, like picking a team to win. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app, select your squad, and place your first bet. It's that simple. The odds for the NBA Finals are up on DraftKings right now. You can get Boston at minus 220 to win the title. Dallas is at plus 175. New to DraftKings, listen up. New customers can get a no-sweat bet up to $1,500. Just deposit at least $5 and you'll get a bonus bet back equal to your first bet if it doesn't hit. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code HOOPS. That's code HOOPS, HOOPS, for new customers to get a no-sweat bet up to $1,500 if your first bet doesn't hit. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. So here's my prediction. I'm picking Boston in 6 games. And my reasoning is pretty simple. I think that Dallas's defense, even though it is an elite defense, is a little bit dependent on loading up on the strong side. Go through their matchups in the first 3 rounds. With the Clippers, Ivica Zubac, non-shooter. Terrence Mann, guy who can knock down threes, but not a super aggressive three-point shooter. Russell Westbrook, bad three-point shooter. PJ Tucker, bad three-point shooter. Go to the Thunder series. Lou Dort and Josh Giddey were guys that you weren't necessarily concerned about chasing off the line. Chet Holmgren had a bad shooting series. Even Kason Wallace and Aaron Wiggins struggled to shoot, so they could really load up the strong side. For the Timberwolves, Rudy Gobert, non-shooter. Jaden McDaniels, a guy they weren't particularly worried about. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, a guy they weren't worried about. Kyle Anderson, non-shooter. That is not what you're dealing with Boston. All 8 of their core rotation players, including the core guys, Derek White, Drew Holiday, Jayson Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Porzingis, Horford off the bench, Peyton Pritchard, and Sam Hauser. That's probably going to be the core 8 guys you see in the series. All 8 of them are guys that you basically can't leave open. And so it's just a fundamentally different type of defensive situation that they are in. Boston, in my opinion, is going to force Dallas out of their core defensive schemes and really challenge their depth of personnel that can contain on the perimeter. What does that mean? When you can load up on the strong side, you can ask a guard to chase over the top, like a Derrick Jones Jr. You can maintain your best available matchups, and you can have one elite perimeter defender like Derrick Jones Jr. do just such a great job on Ant that it kind of changes the series, right? Or PJ Washington do a good job on Karl Anthony Towns. That's not what it's going to be like against Boston. It is going to be a down-the-roster job of containing on the perimeter in a far more spaced-out environment. And I do not think Dallas is that type of defense. Interestingly enough, I don't think Boston is a very good load up the strong side type of defense because they're not a great rim protection team, right? And they're a little bit smaller on the perimeter. But I think Boston is an excellent spread the floor, contain on the perimeter, depth of perimeter defense type of team. These are two very different defenses. Like Boston is actually like really well equipped to guard themselves, right? Because you'd be comfortable with Jaylen Brown guarding a guy, Tatum guarding a guy, Drew Holiday guarding a guy, Derek White guarding a guy. That is not the type of build that Dallas has. And so I want to be clear. I expect Luka to look great. And I think Dallas's offense will function for stretches of the series. I think they'll win games in this series. I just think Boston's going to get good looks more consistently. And when I back to that fifth prediction that I had, I think there will be nights when Boston's hitting their threes and they run Dallas out of the gym. As I mentioned, I think there will be at least 2 Boston wins in this series where the game is over in the early fourth quarter. I think Dallas's wins will be more grind out, like stuck in the half court, lower scoring, Luka out execute some type of games. But to be clear, Boston's a really good clutch team too. These two teams actually ranked 3rd and 4th in net rating in clutch situations in the regular season, through ranked with the entire NBA. These are both elite clutch teams. And so like if Boston actually steals 1 or 2 of the clutch games early in the series, that's where Dallas could be in real trouble. One other thing, Boston is the more experienced team. Tatum, Horford, Brown, and Derek White have all played in the finals. Drew Holiday literally won the finals in 2021. They should be relatively comfortable in this setting, while there might be some jitters on the Dallas front. If I had to guess a pathway for how I think the series is going to go, I think Dallas will steal 1 in Boston. If I had to guess, I'll go with game 2. And then I think Boston will steal 1 in Dallas. If I had to guess, I'd go with game 4. And then I think Boston will win games 5 and 6. So if I had to pick game by game, that means I think Boston's going to win game 1, Dallas game 2, Dallas game 3, Boston game 4, Boston game 5, Boston game 6. More or less a similar pathway to what happened to Boston in the 2022 finals. But that's kind of how I see it going at this point. I want to be clear, like Boston very much has or Dallas very much has a chance to win this series. This isn't me saying Boston is 100% going to win and Dallas is a bunch of bums. But in 2 elite teams, I think it is a matchup that favors Boston. I also think Boston is a little bit better on both ends of the floor. I like that they have home court advantage. I like that they're a little bit more experienced. I think Boston is more likely to win the series. And so I am picking Boston to win in 6 games. All right, it's out there. It's in the ether. We're going to cover the games. I'm excited for it. I will see you guys tomorrow night after the final buzzer.